This is part two, where we're going to delve deeply into the consequences of 9/11, what we're doing as a result of it, this ongoing war with this enemy. I hope you'll watch.
This is where freedom rings.
If you believe in America, if you believe in the Constitution empowers us. It's a new day. America's back. America's back, and America's going to get strong again. We're going to defend America, and we're going to defend our interests.
Liberty's voice, Levin TV.
We are not here today, surrounded by our cherished courthouses, to complain and lament what happened 8 years ago. We are here to prevent it from happening again. And this perverted policy must be reversed, because we know that they are going to use that courthouse to put our country on trial, to mark the victims, to exult in the pain of the families, to disgrace the judge, to disgrace our country. This is not an ennobling plan. This is not going to help our country. In the eyes of the rest of the world, they will laugh at us. And if you take one thing away today, folks, take this message. Don't get mad, get busy. This is the beginning of a national campaign. We are going to go out into the districts of every member of Congress who is hiding behind their desk, and we are going to out them. We are going to come after you, and we are going to make sure that you are put on notice. Thank you very much.
Didn't you once tell me you were a liberal?
Yes, I was.
I'm trying to remember that.
Yes, I was.
So what happened? You got slapped in the face with reality.
Well, you know, I will say I was a liberal, but I was a liberal that really didn't, I thought I knew stuff, but I really didn't. I thought if I read the New York Times from front to back, I was well informed. I laugh at that now. And I worked in the news business at one point. I wasn't really interested in terrorism. I mean, I picked and choose. I realize now I wasn't informed. But to defend myself a little bit, or to mitigate that, I pretty much voted the right way. I loved Reagan. I loved him. He spoke right to my gut, and I cried when he died. I voted for his dad. I did vote for Bill Clinton. But I didn't know much about him either. I just thought, oh, fresh blood, and let's try something new.
Let me ask you something. Which presidents have you met, if any? Did you meet George W. Bush?
I've met Barack Obama a number of times, and I met George W. Bush. In fact, I actually got to attend a meeting in the Roosevelt Room with President Bush when they were strategizing over defense of the, you know, when it had been leaked, the domestic surveillance program, terrorist surveillance program, and they were fighting renewal of the Patriot Act.
The NSA program.
Yeah, and I came in to help powwow on that with President Bush. Little old Debra Burlingame, who was born on Offutt Air Force Base in Nebraska, was sitting there with the commander-in-chief and about 20 other people.
Nice man, isn't he?
Very nice man.
Mm-hmm.
Solid guy. I came to feel great affection for that man. And
even if people disagree with some of his policies, very earnest, decent, right? Human being.
I asked someone to get me, because I was invited to one of the holiday parties at the White House, and his very last one before he went out of office, I called up someone and said, you got to get me in there, because I have something I want to say to him. So I got invited to the party, and I was in the, the photo line to have my picture taken, and I said, Mr. President, I only came to this party to tell you, so I could tell you this. And he was smiling, and he said, what is it? And I said, I wanted to thank you. You made a promise to keep us safe, and you did.
And he did, didn't he?
You did. We were never attacked on your watch after 9/11.
Yeah.
And it was a festive moment, and he got really serious. He's proud of that, and he should be. But I met Obama.
I was going to ask you, what circumstances?
Very different circumstances. It was about 3 weeks after he was elected. he had suspended all the trials that were going on down at Gitmo. They'd been ongoing. They were on their way. They were nearing, they probably would have had a trial within a year. He suspended them, and the families were furious. And the families that were most furious, we all were the USS Cole families. Their guy, al-Nashiri, their perpetrator, was on trial finally. And these were military families, and many of them were African American. And this was 3 weeks after he was elected, this meeting took place, because they were going out in the press saying, we're sorry we voted for him. African American military families, we're sorry we voted for him, we want him impeached. They quickly put together a meeting in the Roosevelt Room, same place. He's sitting in the same place George Bush had been, years before when I was there. It was damage control. And he came in and went around the room and shook everyone's hand and did his star power thing and basically assured them that we would have swift justice. And that was in 2009. And now they're talking about a trial date for, some saying 2020. He really betrayed us. And in fact, I wrote a Wall Street Journal piece saying that we were had in that White House meeting. They had their talking points written for the press before we went out of the meeting. It was all written.
Speaking of Guantanamo Bay, he seems to be in a big hurry to empty that place.
He has been.
And he's been emptying this place. And
Right.
the worst of the worst are left, and he keeps releasing them to places like Qatar, like they're going to have any control over them. Do you think, when you're releasing really known terrorists or people who aided and abetted terrorists, how can it possibly be said that he puts national security first? I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I look at this, and I'm very plain-spoken about these things. I can't imagine John Kennedy doing that, or Lyndon Johnson doing that, or Ronald Reagan, or the Bushes, or any of these people doing that. And yet, I want to empty it because it's helping ISIS? No, that's just crazy.
Well, actually, in that meeting, we kind of pressed him on that because he said, he had said that Guantanamo had been a moral stain on the country, and it was a recruiting poster. And we challenged him on that. And he actually admitted that he knew Guantanamo was safe, secure, and humane. He said, but the pictures of Abu Ghraib, it got kind of mixed up. And I said to him, Mr. President, if you know Guantanamo is safe, secure, and humane, instead of closing it, why don't you use your considerable capital to go out and rehabilitate its image? And he just shrugged. So I don't actually believe that even he believes what he's out there saying about Guantanamo. But one thing he does say is that he believes that the ISIS threat isn't an existential threat.
Is not.
Is not. He said at one point that we could survive another 9/11. We're resilient and we could survive it. He has also said, John Kerry has said the same thing, that he really wants to get terrorism, it's always going to be with us, and he wants to get it back to it's just sort of a nuisance. In 2004, Kerry said, like prostitution. It's always going to be there, and we'll always have to deal with it, but it's really not going to affect our lives very much. And this goes to this whole crime versus war thing. He's not a war president. He doesn't even have it in his DNA to be a war president. And he's interested in domestic stuff. And so he doesn't want to waste his time on it. And you know what? Bill Clinton didn't either. And that's, the guy I voted for. After 9/11, I went back and looked at that. Bill Clinton blew off every attack. It was just, I don't want to get mired into all this terrorism, global politics stuff. I want to change our country.
What do you make of the fact that groups like CARE and Muslim Brotherhood-related groups, front groups in this country, appear to have such easy access to the Justice Department, to the Defense Department, to the White House, to our training manuals, to training, civil servants on how they're supposed to behave and treat Muslims and so forth. What do you make of that?
Well, I think initially, even George Bush let those people in. I mean, some of this stuff was happening during the Bush administration. And even President Clinton had Rahman al-Amoudi, who's now in a federal prison. George Bush as well. He was the guy in charge of all our federal prison Muslim chaplaincy. There's pictures of him. There's pictures of Nahad Awad standing over George Bush's shoulder.
The head of CARE.
Yes, the head of CARE. You can go through and see who they all are. I think there's a certain amount of, I didn't know this till after I really dug into the weeds after 9/11, that there's a lot of ignorance on Capitol Hill. But that's early on. Now we know who these people
And
are.
there's no excuse now.
Yeah, but there's no, right, and we know who they are. There's lots of media out there explaining who they are. So I can only believe that in the case of President Obama, he likes the Muslim Brotherhood. He brought them down into a speech in Cairo, which he'd been planning while he was even running, over the objections of President Mubarak, who had outlawed them from even being in the country. He insisted that they sit in the front row. He supported Morsi, even after our embassy on September 11th was attacked in 2012, and Morsi sat on his hands for 3 days while the American flag was taken down in front of our embassy and the black flag of Al-Qaeda was hoisted up.
And Morsi, Muslim Brotherhood.
Muslim
Egypt.
Brotherhood.
Right.
So I just think that,
And when the people rose up against him,
yes,
Obama still supported Morsi.
yes, and not so much as an inspiring word for the Green Movement. Now, I know there's a lot of people, our friend Michael Ledeen, who thinks the Green Movement wasn't what people think it was, but it was an opportunity to do some truth-telling about that country. And I think that the president, when he has an opportunity to do that, should always do it, unless there's some other extreme exigency that prevents it. And he hasn't done it. I think he really supports these people.
They topple this regime in Libya. He, Hillary Clinton, the rest of them, they topple. Gaddafi was in a box. He basically surrendered everything. He surrendered his chemical, but he surrendered his nuclear. He said, I'm your puppy. I don't want anything to happen to me like happened to that guy over there. He's also giving us information about terrorists and where they are and so forth. The Europeans want him out. I wasn't quite sure why. And we take the lead through NATO to do exactly the same thing. And now we have an absolute disaster on our hands there. We've got terrorist groups taking over the country, taking over the oil fields, taking over the coastlines, Tripoli and all the rest of it. What in the heck were they thinking?
Well, I like to point to the videotape in 2000, I think it was it December? It was sometime in 2009 where Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, there's a big press thing, you can watch it on YouTube. She welcomes, I think his first name was Qasim Gaddafi. Gaddafi's son was the foreign minister of Libya. She welcomed him to the State Department and talked about what a wonderful partner Libya was in the war on terror. And they were. He had, like you said, given up all his weapons or his weapons programs and was giving us all this intel on the rat lines into Iraq. He was a wonderful partner at that point. Now fast forward to 2011 and she's got an open mic learning that Gaddafi's been killed and she laughs, we came, we saw, he died, and then she chuckled. And now we have a failed state. And I am under the impression there's been reporting that she was the one who really went to bat for the U.S. leading NATO in taking out Gaddafi.
Why? Because they wanted to make nice with the Europeans or something? This has never made any sense to me.
Well, I always thought it had to do with Libyan oil, but I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. But wouldn't it be nice to question her about it?
Yeah, good luck with that. Maybe we'll get to see it in her emails. But
Right.
Good luck with that, too.
Right.
Now, Isn't it fair to blame Hillary Clinton as Secretary of State for many of the failures in the Obama administration? I'm sure Obama calls the shots, but Secretary of State, you know, that's not Department of HUD. And when you look at the Middle East, when you look at Iraq now, it was a budding democracy. You know, who knew if it was going to last? But then to pull out the way we did, I don't think we've ever done that after any major battle. And then even now, not to unleash our military against our enemies the way that it needs to be unleashed. And you know these generals are chomping at the bit, or a lot of these commanders are anyway. It's a huge, huge mess. Isn't it legitimate to lay that at her feet as she seeks to be the next commander-in-chief?
Of course it is, especially since she touts her experience and all her accomplishments as a Secretary of State. I think we have an obligation. I think the media, who are supposed to be, you know, doing our, you know, work for us, should absolutely be asking her about that, and absolutely holding her accountable, because I never heard a whiff of her disagreeing with any of these policies. And even what was going on in Benghazi, we never really heard the backstory about the weapons program that was the...
Now talk about that, because Rand Paul insists that's why all the hush-hush, that's why all the cover-up, that's why the lack of sending the military, that there were clandestine operations going on, moving weapons through there. Is that what you're thinking?
I remember Rand Paul actually asking Hillary Clinton in that hearing, and her response was, asking about the weapons, you'll have to ask the CIA about that.
So she didn't deny it.
She said, I don't know, you'll have to ask them. So she punted. But I've heard that they were trying to collect weapons, and I've heard that that had already been distributed, or they were on the street in Libya, and I heard also that they were trying to run them through Turkey to the Syrian rebels, who the Syrian rebels were, some of them ordinary people, but the faction that's doing the most damage was Al-Qaeda, an Al-Qaeda affiliated, Al-Qaeda related. Al-Qaeda is 24 different groups,
yeah,
okay?
It's a Hydra now.
Exactly. So you could say, I think with great confidence, if that's what they were doing, they were arming our enemies. They were arming Al-Qaeda. And they could never say that out loud back then. And that's why they were in this clandestine, dangerous place.
Do you think it's fair to say that when George Bush left office, that Al-Qaeda and the rest of them were pretty much in a box? Not completely, we understand the enemy. And then due to Obama, Clinton's policies now, they're totally out of the box. They're in scores of countries. They've got all this land they've conquered, oil, money, you know, doing all kinds of things. Let me ask you this. Do you think, is there anything, and I'm trying to think myself, is there anything Hillary Clinton is proposing that would be effective in dealing with this enemy? I can't think of one.
Well, I think the answer is no, I can't either, because I also know that she has a record of going to the UN and saying to the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, 57 Muslim states, that wanted to pass a UN resolution outlawing insults to Islam, okay, insults to religion. She told them that she was very supportive of this, but that it wouldn't really fly in America because of the First Amendment. So we'll have to get around that by shaming. Those were her words. We'll have to use shaming, okay? How do you fight an enemy whose whole raison d'etre comes from the Quran and the political ideology, which is Islam? Now, we know, we have to say the disclaimer, that there's a spectrum of Sharia, some which is hardcore Salafist Wahhabi, you know, hardcore Wahhabism or Sharia. And on here where it's just halal foods and wearing headscarves, and it may even be somewhat secular.
But we're not talking about them.
We're not talking about
them.
those. We're talking about these. And those are the people who are pushing for infringements on free speech in Western countries. Why are they doing that? Why have they been so assiduously going after people saying things? Because everyone knows, and the founders up there on your wall knew, that you lose, that freedom of speech is the first freedom, and you lose it all if you can't go out and tell the truth and petition your government and criticize bad ideas. And so they've been very smart about that. And here is Hillary Clinton playing right along. And as far as fighting ISIS, she recently said that under her presidency, there will be no boots on the ground in the Middle East. And then someone said, well, there's 5,000 there right now, you know. So, but that's what she's campaigning on. And I know she lies a lot. I'm sorry, she does. She's a proven liar about very important things, not what she had for lunch or yoga. I'm going to take her at her word. I'm going to take her that when she says things, we're only getting half of the story. It's even worse, even worse.
Sunday's 9/11, 15th anniversary. Did you think 15 years later that you'd be seeing really the evisceration of the United States military? We're 700 pilots short in the Air Force, 1,000 pilots short next year. Where the Army's going to be down to the lowest level since before World War I, where the Marines are going to be under 200,000, where we're going to be under, we are under now 300 ships in the Navy. We're under Reagan, we had over 600 ships. The Islamic enemy that we've been talking about, there's also the Red Chinese moving into the South and East China Sea, among other places. You see Putin is on the move. What is the mindset? What is the mindset that would do more damage to the United States military and the ability for us to defend ourselves than the enemy does? Isn't it that America is the problem? They have to be coming from that perspective, that if we hadn't been this imperial power pushing all these people around after all these decades and maybe a century and a half, maybe these things wouldn't be happening. Do you think that's what it is?
I don't know the answer to that. I only know this, that America, without America taking the leadership role, the world is worse off.
And we see that now.
Everywhere in the world is worse off. As far as, you know, your original question, did I ever imagine that our military would be decimated like this? No, although I remember under the Carter administration, he took a knife to it, and it was devastating then. And people need to understand, it's not just less ships, less planes. It's less basic nuts and bolts material. They take it out of everywhere. And I remember when Chick was deployed on a carrier in the Mediterranean, I remember getting a letter from him saying, you know, it's dangerous, flying is dangerous now. And he explained that they weren't getting the spare parts for the planes that they need. Those planes hit the decks really hard, stuff falls off. And he said, we're only getting to fly sorties every 2 weeks. He said, somebody's going to get killed. So when you're not getting the nuts and bolts, you don't even have a prepared military, even if the guys are all there. It's very, and that's why, as you know, Reagan had to spend so much of his, capital on rebuilding the military. He was shocked to see at how badly it had been depleted under Carter. But, you know, we were at peace then. Now we're in the middle of chaos taking place, and you see the Iranian fast boats, and you see what's going on with North Korea. It's insane. It's insane. And they only respond to strength. They do not respond to the outraged hand of appeasement and forbearance. They simply do not.
If this is an inappropriate question, don't answer it. I often think of my grandfather who fought at Guam and Iwo Jima, and my great uncle who fought at Guadalcanal, and I think of my father, although he tells me what he thinks. I wonder what they would be thinking. What do you think Chick would be saying about what's going on?
I think about that all the time. Chick would be, number one, furious. He'd be furious at what was done on 9/11. I think about what if it had been a different pilot in that cockpit. Chick would have wanted to put his uniform back on. He was 52, he was too old at that point. But I think he would be absolutely furious. And he bellyached about the Carter cuts. But in terms of the role of America in the world, I think he would be deeply worried and frustrated. Because these guys are, military are action people. Yeah, we have analysts, we have PhDs in our officer ranks. They're smart. But they also are, Chick was a problem solver. They're solutions people. They don't want to sit around and discuss and emote. They want to figure it out and then go fix it. And I think that would frustrate him terribly.
I think he'd be proud of his little sister, don't you?
I think he'd be kind of surprised because we used to have political arguments all the time. And I think he'd be saying, finally, she got it right.
And you think he thinks up there, go give him hell and keep it up?
What he used to say to me was, keep punching, Deb. Keep punching.
How did you meet Bob? Your husband's a really great guy, standing over there.
It's actually a really nice story.
Wasn't in a magazine or anything?
No. Bob and I met in 1975. I was 21 years old back then. I was in an acting theater school. He had graduated from the school, and he came back to stage manage a play I was in. We became very good friends. I had a boyfriend then, so we weren't romantically.
Doesn't matter, you weren't married.
But we weren't a romantic couple, but we became great friends for 4 years. And then I met the man that I married and had a daughter with, and I lost track of Bob. I had left that business entirely, and I never heard from him or saw him again for 22 years. On 9/11, Bob was on his way to work. He was out of the business too. He worked in the financial district. And he saw Flight 11 he actually witnessed Flight 11 go into the towers. And he was able to get home that night. The next night, he turned on his television. He was just listening, not watching, and he heard my voice. And he thought, I think I recognize that voice. My brother Brad and I were doing a press conference in Los Angeles, very small. And he walked in just as a chyron came up that said, Brad and Debra Burlingame, siblings of Captain Charles F. Burlingame, Pentagon. And he was stunned because he knew Brad too. Brad and I were roommates then, and he used to come to our parties. And, but of course, I was 47 now, not 25. I looked like Deborah's mother at this point. But he sent me a condolence card, and I thought, oh my God, it's my buddy from the neighborhood playhouse. And I sent him an email back saying, thank you so much, and we started communicating. In 2003, we got married.
It's probably because he never lost an eye for you, right, Bob?
He actually proposed to me on the stage of the theater where he met me.
Really?
Yeah,
Isn't that
because
romantic?
he's the chairman of that board of that theater school.
I don't want your address, obviously, but you live in New York.
Yes.
I take it. And let me ask you this. 9/11, do you think 20 years from now, knowing what you know 15 years from that date, that it'll be a distant memory?
Yes, I think it will be a distant memory, but it doesn't mean that it won't be remembered. And I'm hoping, I've had a lot of involvement with the National Memorial and Museum. Our goal is to tell this story it has to be a lasting story. It's a cautionary tale. And Mark, the story isn't over.
No, it's not.
And so it's very important that we educate the next generation of people about who they were, what they did, and what the people who have come after them are doing. George Bush was right about this. This is a generational war. And it's going to take all of our resources, all of our smartest people, and it's going to take dedication, because these people are smart, they're dedicated, they're cunning, and they're very patient. And we have to match them to beat them.
And they want to destroy us.
They do.
And they're going to keep plotting and plotting and plotting, and as weaponry gets more and more sophisticated, it'll take fewer and fewer of them to do these things.
And the cunning part is they're getting us to help them destroy ourselves. That's what the infiltration of all of our cultural institutions are, our schools, our government.
Look at college campuses. They've turned, in 5 years now, 5 years. If you're a Jewish kid that supports Israel and you run to be president of your student government and so forth, and you object to these efforts to embargo Israel and so forth, you're threatened.
Right.
And the administration, for the most part, doesn't do anything about it. And you see more and more of this growing in this anti-Semitism. You know, they always say that's the canary in the coal mine.
Yes.
You agree with that?
I do agree with that, because, you know, the FBI statistics, they track this. They keep close track of it, and I've heard you talk about it. Anti-Semitism, attacks on the basis of being Jewish in this country, 6 times more, or 8 times more, 8 times greater than any other religions, and 6 times more than Muslim religion. Maybe I didn't say that right,
No,
but it's
getting worse.
It's unbelievable. And that's why I really believe we must affirmatively push back on this. The Council on American Islamic Relations actually tried to get me kicked off the memorial board. And fortunately, those people there know me, and they put out a statement saying that's not going to happen. We're proud of working with her. That's the kind of pushback we need to do. A group of imams tried to get the story of Al-Qaeda taken out of the museum. And I was so proud of the foundation. They said, no, we're not changing a frame of this 7-minute film. That's the kind of pushback we need to do, but we have to recognize who they are and what they're trying to do. But they absolutely, when you hear someone call you an Islamophobe, be a little proud of that. That means you got some truth out.
Are you on their list like
and you've made them, I don't know, I don't think so, because I think they saw that their work on me wasn't happening. Because when they call me an Islamophobe, to me that's the signal to try and get me to shut up. I'm getting too close to doing something that is going to work against them. I mean, that energizes me. And also, to call the sister of one of the pilots who died an Islamophobe who has an irrational fear of Muslims is insane. And it's also an insult to Muslims, quite frankly, because there are plenty of them who are against this too.
Mm-hmm.
And
well, look what's going on in the Middle East. The fact of the matter is, more Muslims are being killed and tortured and enslaved by other Muslims than anybody else. You know, in addition to the Yazidis being destroyed and the Kurds being destroyed and Christians generally being destroyed, look what they do to each other. I wanted to ask you about the 9/11 memorial in New York. Mm-hmm. Why was that so controversial? Why were there groups what were they protesting exactly?
Well, there were so many different protests. I'm not sure which one you mean. I mean, the families didn't, and the initial design had all the names underground. All you were going to see above ground were big fountains. And they said, no, that's an insult. And they won that battle. Mm-hmm. The big one that I was involved in involved the International Freedom Center. That was a behind the closed doors deal that the LMDC board worked out with some of their cronies.
What's that?
The Lower Manhattan Development Corporation, which was created to buy between Washington and Albany to divvy out billions of dollars of federal money and state money to rebuild Ground Zero. And the International Freedom Center was going to be, when I found out about it, was when I joined the board. And I kept asking people, what is it and what's going to be in it? No one could tell me. So I did some research, and I found out that it was basically going to be a human rights museum right on Ground Zero. They'd already raised millions of dollars for it. It was going to take up 300,000 square feet. It was supported by George Soros and every liberal group you can imagine. And it was going to tell the story of slavery and Jim Crow and Chinese dissidents and Native American Indians genocide. And I went crazy. I said, you've got to be kidding me. They're going to bring that America the Bad story on top of where all these people died? Not in your life.
And you won.
We did. We put it down in, I'm proud to say, 3 months and 3 weeks. New York Times wrote 5 editorials in that period denouncing us, and they named me by name. They wouldn't let me respond. They had one editorial that referred to me as, the title was The Governor's Proxy, meaning I was telling George Pataki what to do, governor of New York. And when they did that, I knew we were going to win for sure, because they had given us so much power. Once they do that, they can't take it back.
Let me ask you this. If you had a final message to tell my viewers, our viewers, about this anniversary, I don't even like the word anniversary, you know, that's typically a very positive thing, but the 15th year Sunday from the time of this massacre, what would that message be?
You know, the anniversary for me is about the people we lost. And so
That's right. It's not academic for you.
It's about remembering them. I mean, because 9/11, Mark, is with us every day in what's happening. But I get what your question is what's the most important thing, the lesson of that day for people to remember? And it's, for me, a spiritual one. Faith, family, friends. Life is fleeting. But when it comes to this country, it's that we have to, Reagan said it, this isn't something that we passively accept, freedom and all our rights. We have to be aggressive. We have to affirmatively protect them and fight for them. And to me, that's one of the biggest lessons of 9/11.
Are we losing them?
Yes, we are losing them. They're incrementally. This past 8 years under President Obama have been devastating for our rights. When you have institutions in this country that are no longer respected. The IRS used to be feared, but now it's
loathed.
Yes. And now it's the idea that they could go after you is quite real. There was never any reckoning for them. The Justice Department has now been corrupted with this Hillary Clinton thing. The FBI was considered a stellar organization, and now it has been corrupted. The EPA, you could go through all the agencies. Now we have Jay Johnson, who's head of DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, going in front of an Islamic front group, the Islamic Society of North America, and telling them, I'm with you. They were an unindicted co-conspirator in the biggest material terrorist support trial in the history of this country. So I despair at it, but, you know, I do think of Chick, you know, and he said, you know, keep punching. As long as there is one man or woman wearing the American uniform in a dangerous place in the world, we civilians can never give up this fight for our country.
You know, it's a great honor to have had you here. It really is, to spend this time with you. I feel like I've known you forever.
I know.
I appreciate everything you've done, everything you're doing. And my heart always goes out to you for the loss of Chick. But you know what? Chick will be remembered forever.
Yeah.
Those men and those women on that day, They're forever in the memory of this country. And it wasn't the first battle in this war, but it was the first big hit the country took in this war. And you're right, and George Bush is right. This is going to go on for generations, and we better be ready for it, or we're going to have a lot more suffering going on in this country. I just want to thank you. It's a great honor, and God bless you very much.
Thank you, Mark.
All right, take care. Isn't Debra Burlingame a wonderful lady? Those 9/11 family members, the Gold Star family members, these are people who have sacrificed. These are people who understand the battle that we're up against. We have young men and women all over the world, one hellhole after another, putting their lives on the line like so many of us have never done in order to protect this country and protect strangers and protect people who would even kill them. Now, it's time we get this right, because this enemy is on the move. This enemy is on the move in the Middle East, in North Africa. The enemy is on the move in Central and South America. The enemy is on the move in Europe, and the enemy is on the move within our own borders. This isn't blasphemy against Muslims. This is a direct message about the enemy who has secreted itself among us. Radical, fundamentalist Muslims. The fact of the matter is, ladies and gentlemen, I don't have a lot of faith in our current political leadership. I absolutely do not. I do not have a lot of faith in these cherry-picked generals and admirals who Obama has set up throughout the military. And I'm quite concerned that we're going to get slammed and slammed again. And when you look at the deal that we made with Iran, where we gave them tens of billions of dollars, when you look at we're paying for our American citizens, we're paying ransom for hostages, when you look at these side agreements, these secret deals, where even though they violated the agreement, they're able to advance their ICBM technologies and build nuclear warheads and threaten our ships at sea, and we don't do a thing about it. And of course, there's more than that. The spread of ISIS and the refusal to go where ISIS is and pound them into the ground. I am very concerned. I'm very concerned about our immigration policies. We do not have the capacity to vet all these refugees coming from Syria and other war-torn terrorist regions of the world. We do not have the capacity because we do not know who they are, and they're from war-torn countries. So how do they know who they are? They don't. So I'm worried about this country. I'm worried about the future. And I do not think we have the political or military leadership right now to address this properly. This is not an attack on the military. I said the military leadership, the political leadership. It's a disaster. But we'll go through this together. 9/11's a time to remember. It's time to remember those who perished. And it's time to remember, if we don't stand up and do what needs to be done, more will follow. We wish all the 9/11 families all the best, all the Gold Star families all the best. Be well.